right, Chris, let's light this candle. It's Friday.
Friday, Friday,
Friday.
Friday.
Last
I'm excited.
Friday in March.
That's right. This particular Friday also happens to be my wife's birthday.
Happy
So happy
birthday.
birthday to my wife, right?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Kayla. Um, that's not why you're here, though. Why you're here is because it's On the Rocks, the e-commerce hour by On the Rocks, and you want to talk about that, the voice of Amazon seller report. Jay, remind me who publishes this?
This was published by Smart Scout.
All right.
Um, I don't exactly know what else they do, but I am now on their mailing list. And I've seen some good
You're
stuff
finding
coming
out.
out of there. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Right. Right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Chris. He's Jay. We are the host of the show, and we're going to talk about the voice of the seller report today. We're going to talk about Amazon fees, Amazon competition, Amazon profitability, seller sentiment more broadly. That's all kind of stuff that Smart Scout has done research for in putting together their summary here. The main goal here is to summarize and talk through whether Amazon sellers are thriving or barely surviving. And so we'll talk about also what some of these things may mean to you as an Amazon seller or an e-commerce brand more broadly. So Jay, any other introduction things that you want to talk about as we talk about the seller report today?
Well, I just want to say that, we talked about some issues with Amazon 2 months
Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
maybe about the turn of the year.
right.
And, this dissatisfaction, Amazon making changes to policy, wanting companies to give up their manufacturers and, changing refund policies. And a lot of that is, we could see some of that in here. And,
Mm,
I was really surprised by some of it and some of it not so surprised. So, yeah.
yeah. All right. So folks at Smart Scout talked to a bunch of different people. I don't know. I don't know exactly the number of companies that they talked to. I don't see that here at the top part, but they were all kinds of different sizes of sailors. Like these are folks from 32% of the respondents were $0 to $100,000, but all the way up to 22% were 5 million plus. So this is a pretty wide range of respondents. And of all kinds of different sizes. Like those different sellers are all going to have different kinds of problems or different kinds of issues, and different kinds of opportunities. And so I think it's good that there is such a robust touch point that there were touch points across all of these different categories for sure. The types of people that were doing these selling, a lot of them, about 40%, were what is it? Agency service provider? No, wholesale retailers. I'm not very good with colors, Jay.
Yeah.
With about 20% being private labels or private brands, 28% being retail arbitrage, Jay, which is a pretty surprisingly large segment here.
Well, I think
And
they
then
put retail and arbitrage together.
okay, that makes a lot more sense. So
Yeah.
not retail and online arbitrage,
Right.
retail
Yeah.
arbitrage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Right, got it. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And then 10% is just as an agency or a service provider. So again, a nice mix of different kinds of entities and businesses um, uh, that were touched on here. Um, Jay, I was a little bit surprised to see like I didn't really think about this, but they asked the question of, is Amazon your main business?
Yeah.
And 86% of their respondents said yes, which is a lot more than I would have expected. When I think about selling on Amazon, a lot of times I think of that as like a supplementary or a secondary income stream, right, to your Shopify store or your main web page. But a lot of the people that were being talked to here, and there are reasons for this, I'm sure. But a lot of those people, this was their main business.
Yeah. And considering, 32% were in the $0 to $100,000 range, I
Yeah, I
thought
guess
that
that's
number was really, really high. That 86%, this was their sole business, and that was
yeah,
what they were doing. I mean, it might be a side hustle for them. They might have a full time job, but
yeah,
I mean, it's still, it's a lot of people that they are relying upon Amazon to make their living. And
Yeah.
well, we'll talk about fees, but I mean, if you're bringing in 100K and your fees are anywhere from 35 to 40%, there's not a lot of money left there to pay a salary.
Yeah, and
Livable wage, that is.
yeah, and so that reflects itself in the way that these sellers are view their compensation. So there obviously there's a wide range of where uh, where compensation falls out, like take home pay based items, right? But 50% of the respondents were less than $60,000
Mm-hmm.
of of take home pay, which is basically like the median U.S. salary, and so that does beg that question, Jay. Like, are these sellers doing this on the side? Like, is this just a hustle? Is this like a Airbnb,
Yeah.
or is this uh, or is this just a place to go struggle right now? Um,
Yeah.
but that being said, there were 13% of respondents had take home pay over $200,000. So that's a pretty substantial chunk. So that felt like a good number. Um,
Well, considering 22% had over 5 million in sales,
I
I
guess that
think
number's pretty
I
small.
I think that number's pretty small. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I would have liked to have seen another strat there. Maybe 500,000 and higher. 2 to 300,000, 2 to 5,000, 2 to 500,000, and then 500,000 and up, and just see
yeah.
how that broke out. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would have expected to see a higher salary there.
Well, and there's at least a lack of clarity, right? Because this is salary. So
True.
if it could be your
It,
business is making that
yeah.
50% margin and that's coming to you as a flow through and not part of your
Yeah.
salary,
Right.
like that's a possibility.
They could be using the reasonable comp there and
Uh-huh.
pulling it out through an S corp and pulling out
Yeah, potentially,
distributions there. Yeah.
potentially, right?
Very
So
true.
there is some potentially some data missing there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I thought that was a super interesting thing, and then the way that those fall out over the different categories, because they did segregate that, they did do a crosstab there. That those retailers, right,
Mm-hmm.
are some of the highest. Only 66% of, or not only, as much as 66% were under 60K in that
Right.
retail space, with only 4.4 being in that high end. And the private label brands and the wholesalers were much higher on the upper end, a lot closer to that. They were still only at 15%, but they were a
Mm-hmm.
lot closer to that 22% of the bigger companies.
Right.
So it's interesting that that retail space is the one that looks to be lagging behind as far as compensation goes.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
when you're looking at the arbitrage side,
yeah,
your revenue is going to be much smaller because they're selling at
sure,
a much lower price. Now,
right,
what is that the mix of regular retail and arbitrage to know where that sits? I
yeah,
really
right,
would have liked to. I truly would have loved to have seen retail and arbitrage as separate segments as well. But
right.
there's only so much you can do when you're collecting data.
Yeah,
So
right. And then putting it in a whatever this is, like a 30-page
right,
PDF, right? So yeah, while we may have wanted to know more or have more information, I think this is still a pretty good subset. Jay, was there anything that in looking at just who the respondents were, was there anything that particularly like stood out as, whew, that's unusual or unexpected?
yeah, I would have thought that there would have been more revenue on that 5 million side.
Yeah, and I wonder.
Because and again, we don't know what the population was that they were looking at, but I think more than 22% is having sales of 5 million or more, and there are some major brands that are on Amazon.
Yeah,
So it's not their only. I mean, Apple and Samsung, they all have stores on Amazon, so it's not their
yeah.
only source. But I would have thought that number would have been much higher, and um, yeah, just 86%. It's their only business. I mean, I thought that was really, really
Yeah,
high.
I think so too. That is their main business. That was unexpected, especially when you start to look at that 50% salary being low. Um, Again, maybe that's just we need more data on exactly what that means. But I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, most
The
definitely.
the Voice of Amazon report then goes on to talk about the Amazon risks and challenges. And they ask this question of what's the hardest part of selling on Amazon? And at least from my perspective, I think this is like no surprise. The biggest one is competition. Who could have possibly imagined that would be the biggest and hardest part of selling on Amazon, right? It's the 36% of the respondents selected that one. And especially, Jay, like we've talked about before, when you sell on Amazon, and especially if you have a product that's super successful, you all of a sudden have a competitor in Amazon. So that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, and also knowing that competitors report other competitors for to get an advantage, and I truly wanted to see competition from Amazon and competition from others broken out to see what the perception is there. So,
right.
Yeah, and right behind the competition is increasing fulfillment fees.
Yeah.
And that doesn't
Also not a surprise.
Anybody. I mean,
Nope.
Yeah.
No.
The shining spot though at 8% is advertising. So they do make it really easy to advertise, and you can spend a shit ton of cash on your PPC, but apparently it's not as big an issue to the sellers as the other factors are. And mind you, the other one coming in at 25% was account health. Now, we log into Amazon accounts all the time, and I would say 7 out of 10 there's account health warnings when you log in. It's like, you're at risk of your account being shut down. Well, okay, we talked to the business owner, and they're hitting us up with this or this or this, and it's horrendous. I mean, honestly. And, I mean, I understand it. They want to make sure that if you are selling products on their platform, you have the products to sell. You're not delaying getting them out the door. You're taking care of their customer, because that's truly who it is. It's Amazon's customer. So, they want to make sure that they are happy.
Right, of course. Absolutely. The crosstabs of some of these things were actually really interesting too, because it was the competition on the private label side was almost 50%, with the fees actually only being 15% of the respondents having listing that as the hardest part of selling on Amazon. So I thought that was really interesting.
And when you go back and look at the practice of the refund or the inventory reimbursement, it's the private label where they want to know who you are using as your manufacturer or what your manufacturing cost is. So I can see where that is an issue, because you got a great product. Amazon's going to come in there and start selling it. They want to know where you're getting it, because they're going to buy 10 times the quantity and pay 10 times less. 10% less.
10% less.
So,
they did ask some questions around like what kinds of other risks that these folks saw, and specifically they asked, and I wonder if this was part of what they were trying to accomplish through their survey. They asked, do international sellers pose risks to your business? And Jay, I don't think that this would be any surprise at all, but the answer was yes, a lot. Almost 2/3 of respondents answered yes. And to me, I think that's not all that surprising, because we've talked about it here, right? Especially if you're in like an arbitraging space or something like that. The Chinese manufacturers that are Shein and Temu, they have obviously saturated the market here in the United States. So I would expect that international exposure to be a risk to companies just like that. And then Jay, I think potentially, like if you were to do this survey again for 2025, maybe that number goes down a bit because of the current tariff situation, where international sellers are a little bit less likely potentially, or they're going to have to be more expensive, all of those kinds of things. So maybe that international seller risk feels a little different in the current environment versus in the 2024 environment. Um, the
So, one question I have, are these FBA customers or sellers, or are they all Amazon sellers? Because
Yeah,
if they are, if they do their own fulfillment, they can get
yeah,
in on the uh,
de
exception,
minimis.
the
Yeah,
tariff exception for the small price package.
yeah,
So that is probably where they're feeling a lot of that pressure.
right,
And like you said, I think it once those tariffs go into effect, and we have the reciprocal tariffs, and we don't have a way to. Well, actually, we don't have a way yet. We don't know if Elon's working on that. With his team of crack developers
sure,
to have a way to charge those individual packages. So that's one thing there. So we'll have to see. But a workaround to the tariffs would have been to use that exception on the small package and try to bring them in and sell them directly through China. Just have them drop ship them basically. But
right.
at some point that's going to go away. It did for a day, but yeah,
But then it came back.
yeah.
Um,
So
there's an interesting little nugget built that's buried into this, because they did a crosstab, but actually asked the same set of people, the people who have international seller risk. They asked them, "Did your business grow?"
right,
And both sets of respondents, 52%, 53% had growing businesses. So despite all of the other facts, or I guess I know, I'm sorry, 50% or so stayed the same.
stayed the same. Right,
Stay the same. So despite all of the other factors, at least they're not decreasing that much. It looks like about 25% had increases and 20% decreases.
right.
So interesting piece of information there, I think. Um, another question that was asked, and it looks like maybe some respondents didn't answer the question. Maybe, but the next question was, did you raise your prices because of increases in FBA fees? And a vast majority of the respondents said yes, with 20% saying that didn't have international risk saying yes,
Right.
and 30% that did saying yes. And so these folks that feel like they have this international exposure, they're also having this pricing pressure from the Amazon side. So they're getting revenue based pressure from the outside and pricing pressure from the inside. And it's almost as though it's and in fact they use the language here. So war on two fronts. So
It's a complete
you're just getting,
squeeze. Yeah.
yeah, they're just getting squeezed everywhere. And so I thought that
Interesting.
I thought the disparity there, that 30% like versus 20%, that disparity is really interesting, because that's a big difference. Jay, if you think about that, right? What can sellers do to do anything about that? Is there
There's
any
not much they can
opportunity
do.
to? Yeah,
It's rock and hard place right there. It's hard.
yeah,
Yeah. The only thing you could do is use the dropship method to kind of become an international supplier yourself. But again, that's
sure,
only going to work for so long if these tariffs go in place. So
yeah. Well, and we've talked about it on other shows. One of the things that you can do in the face of tariff pressure is go back to your supplier, um, and ask if they can do it cheaper, because there is at least some likelihood that they're going to want to continue to have your volume. Maybe not if you're $100,000 a year or less, but if you're one of those $5 million a year, they're definitely going to want to continue to keep that relationship, I'm sure. So
definitely.
they may be able to find you a spot. Another area of concern, and it's one that I don't know that I've run into all that much, but Jay, you were talking about it, this account health issue, right? Is have you been suspended? Um, and 35% of respondents had responded that they've either been suspended or been threatened of some kind of suspension. And Jay, that's especially for sellers that are in the $1 million to $5 million range. Like it's they really get hit in this space, is what it looks like.
Yeah, and
Um,
I would bet that those are the companies that are scaling,
yeah,
and as they're growing, they have cash flow issues, they have
mm,
in stock issues or stock out issues, and they have distribution issues because they're
yeah,
growing through it. And that's probably why. Because once you get above that level, you're probably going to have a stock there that is going to be suffice, and you're not going to
yeah,
have cash flow issues because, again, you have the stock in hand. So it's not a
right,
huge issue. So, you're going to have a steady flow of your products moving. And I really feel for them because you're trying to grow it at the same time you're trying to maintain all those things. It's a lot
yeah,
of work to do that, and you know, you look at $100,000 to $1 million in sales. I mean, if you're making 50K or 60K or less, you might have two or three people, but odds are it's you and maybe a VA that's handling that company. That's a lot
yeah,
of
right,
work for two people.
right. There's a lot of work. And so that can make you feel even more squeezed, right? Because now not only are you being squeezed by your pricing pressure, you're being squeezed by your international competition,
Right.
but now you're being squeezed on your time in the way that you can't even sell your product because you've been suspended. Um, New sellers are obviously the most unlikely to be suspended because they are just like hopping on, right? It's the ones that have been there for a while that are more likely.
Agreed.
Um, the fear of being suspended, though, is very real across the board, and that's true of everyone. And they asked this. They did a uh, they did this the sub tabs on this one, right? They did one based on that how much money you make. And there was a drop, a very noticeable drop in the very, very high end. Like those folks aren't quite as concerned about having a suspension, but every category is 5.5 or higher, and the other three categories, so everybody who's making $200,000 or less, is 6.5 or higher,
Wow.
with the majority being almost like basically almost seven. And so anytime that and if you think about that, 86% of these people, this is their main source of business, like seven feels a little bit light, actually. 6.5, 6.8, like that's pretty low. I feel like I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I'd be maybe 8 or 9 all the time because that
Yeah.
source of income, that source of revenue will be so critical to me, to my family, to my business. Like that fear of suspension seems like it would be a thing that would motivate you all the time. Jay, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and we talked about it's a little bit lower in those
Uh-huh.
sellers that are at 5 million and up,
Yep.
but there's a stat here that if Amazon is your main business and you're over 5 million, you're at 6.4 out of 10% worried
Yeah.
about it. So
Right.
it goes a long way.
Yeah, and so I think that actually is very consistent with exactly what we just talked about, actually,
Yeah,
because what that means is like it's not your only source when you're selling elsewhere, right? And those people are only at 4.5. Like that is it is a much different issue to be worried about your account being suspended when you've got a successful Shopify store,
yeah,
and if you needed to, right, you could just sell products there, and Amazon is a different channel to get your product out, right? If Amazon is what you're relying on, like it becomes much more significant to you.
and I truly would have loved to have known what are the alternative seller sites that or the other places they are selling. Are they
Yeah,
on Walmart? Are they on eBay? Are they on Shopify, BigCommerce? You know,
yeah,
where are they selling, and just this, it would have been nice to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but I do think that this is still relevant information because, especially if
Sure.
you're thinking about like us, right, as advisors, knowing that fear of suspension is so high just across the board, right?
Yeah.
The something that becomes important that maybe we've never focused on before is how do you end up being suspended, and what are the things that you can do or the strategies that you can employ to try to help ensure that you don't find yourself in that case, right? So that you can either right, diversify in a way that allows you
Yeah.
to feel like these other folks, where your reliance comes down, so does your fear factor, or you can just feel comfortable that you've done all the right things and you don't need to worry about it as much. So while it would still be a fear, it's just not, it's not happening.
But you go back and recall, we had one client that had their store shut down multiple times,
Yeah.
and well, it, after the third or fourth time, it became a little clearer, and because of the description of what he gave us. But early on, there were like 3 or 4 times the stores were shut down, and they said there's too many different users in their account or something like that. That made
Mm,
no sense whatsoever,
yeah.
and I could see them doing whatever they could, and it might have just been they liked your products and they wanted to shut you down. We don't know,
Right.
but I truly hope that's not the case, because
Right.
you are enabling this store and this marketplace. It would really suck if you were stealing the business and trying to make it all your own, which we know they do to a point, but you know yeah, they got to eat too.
Yeah. Well, and that speaks very much to the next set of questions that the folks at Smart Source asked, and that is Amazon a fair marketplace? And Jay, you'll be shocked to learn that 63% of respondents said, "Not on my watch." Um,
Yeah.
they most folks don't see, most sellers don't see Amazon as a fair marketplace, and that is particularly true of those private label brands, Jay.
Yeah.
And that's not surprising at all. Like we've
Not
just
at
talked
all.
about that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's, you'd be surprised if it was anything outside of this. Almost 75% of respondents were like, nope, in that area. And we've already talked about the reasons why you'd expect that to be the case, right? Like you know that you have competition, and you have competition potentially with the person who is your marketplace, and that does make it seem less fair, right? And I'm sure
Sure.
that there's some underlying other things too, because then, and especially if you have success with maybe extra ad spend, maybe going a long way to get your product sold, you start to be like, well, you just buy yourself in. Like there's a lot of reasons that may influence that that fairness aspect. But this the report doesn't have a lot of extra color on that. But I do think that that would be an interesting thing to explore. Is like, what is it about the Amazon marketplace that you feel like is unfair? Um,
Well, I mean, definitely the additional competition is one of those factors. But
sure.
yeah, sellers look at the fees that they're paying. You have the selling fees, which are the fees to process and handle the sales. You have the fulfillment fees. You have storage fees, and those fulfillment and storage fees increase during the holidays. So yeah, you got to bring more in, and on top of that, they're raising the fee for it. So it makes it very difficult for sellers there. But you know, but what does it cost to run a large distribution center like that?
Yeah.
And granted, Amazon is trying to have more tech and less people doing a lot of that, but
Right.
the infrastructure is expensive. Land and building is expensive. The
The technology is,
electronics and the
yeah.
technology is just outrageous,
Right.
and it's good technology. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah. I
so
get it.
the total fees 35 to 40% of my sales. I get it. I can get it. I don't like
Right.
it, but I do get it. So
Right, and it's also, and we talked about this when we were talking about Amazon a while back,
Yeah.
and that's that marketplace is the biggest one in the United States, right? If you're that's a place people go as a first resource to find a product that they're looking for, and so sometimes I'm sure that there's a charge for just being for being popular, um, right? A people are going to find you charge, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure that's part of it too, and that definitely may make it feel very unfair.
For sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. The uh, the next little bit within the report was around AI's impacts, and Jay, I'm not going to lie to you, I am surprised at the results of the survey for these folks. Um, in this case, a 16% of respondents, which feels kind of high, but will feel even higher in just a moment. But
Yeah.
16% of respondents indicated that that AI's efforts or Amazon's AI efforts hurt their business, which that doesn't feel like that much, right? 16% is not that many, but those those who felt like it helped were only 15%, and that is really surprising to me,
Yeah.
because we've talked about how interesting and on the surface valuable looking the AI infrastructure that Amazon's built out has been, right?
Hmm.
About how they can make your products look better and all that kind of stuff. But only 15% have indicated that it made them feel helped. Um, and that balance is like specifically like more disaggregated or broken if you were not profitable.
Right.
And so those companies that were already like underwater really indicated that uh, they did not they did not that those folks that were being hurt were the ones that were less likely to be profitable. And so I wonder if there's like if there's an imaginative correlation there or what that is, Jay. But I was surprised to see some of these numbers. What was there anything that you saw as you dug into the AI impacts?
Yeah. So the the title is Amazon's AI impacts, and
Right.
so I understand different industries being impacted differently, like arbitrage, and
Mm-hmm.
it should be impacted more because it is a less costly product. But the fact is that how much now we know Amazon is putting AI in their product. I gotta wonder: is there a switch you have to turn on in your Seller Central to utilize it? And did people think they were using it or having it used when they actually weren't?
Mm.
And maybe they thought they could do a better job using AI than Amazon could, and
Yeah.
that's where that came from.
Yeah, that could be the case. Um, so it is interesting to see that.
Yeah.
Um, also interesting is there's just how there's a question around how likely you are to recommend this to a friend, right? So it's the that final survey question that you get on your Chick-fil-A survey or basically any survey that you go to, and out of the scale of 10, Amazon not really that likely to get recommended to a friend. 4.5 ish across the board, and then particularly for those middle-sized sellers, those with that are in that income range of $100,000 to $200,000, they are only 3.7. So they must be on either that really deep grind to get that money, or or something, because they really unlikely to recommend Amazon to others. Um, so I thought that was also a little interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Finally, I know we've talked a lot about the way that Amazon supports you. So there's a couple different areas around seller support, and then also the policies and market changes and all that kind of thing. So, um, Jay, does it ever surprise you when people think Amazon support or anybody's support has declined in recent years?
Yeah, no, I mean you're
Yeah,
looking at almost 50% saying
yeah,
that support has declined, with only 12% saying support has increased.
yeah.
Now, I'm assuming that is on the seller side. You know,
Right. It is seller support. Yeah.
from the customer side, I think support has gotten easier.
Hmm.
You know, do you want to speak to a person, or do you want to speak? Do you want to chat? And you
Yeah.
can have somebody on that chat pretty quickly. Now, I was really interested because I noticed there was nothing in here about return policies,
Yeah.
and because yeah, I would really love to know how that is being accepted by the seller population, because you know I under the understanding of they look at the percentage of your purchases and your returns, and if it's under a specific number, if there's a dispute, they're just going to automatically return it. I mean, if you're not a
Hmm.
habitual returner, they're just going to grant you a refund and do that, and that eats into the profits of the seller. And hopefully, you are in that 5 million plus range because you can
Yeah.
afford it. But and well, I say that, I mean, maybe you can't, but I would love to have seen how that was taken by the seller population and
Right.
how they truly feel about that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Now,
Um,
just I know this isn't an Amazon thing, but I recently purchased something on the TikTok shop,
oh yeah. Okay.
and it did not live up to its guarantee,
Hmm.
and I it said 100% return within 30 days. So in about 15 days, I went on the app and I said I'd like to return this. It took 10 days to get the return approved,
Wow.
and then I had to send it back, and then wait for it to get back, and then wait another 5 days after it was received for it to be approved. So that, I mean, it makes me really question: do I want to buy anything from TikTok Shop at this point?
Yeah. Well,
Because
that's an interesting thing because you to this question of did the customer service level improve or decline? TikTok Shop feels, and that might just be the way that it feels. It feels relatively new still, which means that maybe they're getting it on the ground floor here, and they have nowhere to go but up.
maybe, yeah,
Maybe I don't know, but that sounds like a terrible experience, and you wouldn't want anyone to have that experience, and so that's part of the reason why finding some information from these surveys about what people are feeling can be so
right,
important.
it's so
One,
important.
yeah, there's obviously a lot of information within this report, and so one other thing that I did want to highlight is that there that we talked about FBA and all of the fees of FBA, um, and we mentioned that 64% of folks had to increase their prices because of these FBA fees. But Jay, did you see that that 40%, 37% of respondents were leaning into fulfilled by merchant
Yeah,
instead?
yeah,
So in order to combat those fees, 40% of the respondents started to do more fulfillment on their own, so fulfilled by themselves rather than using FBA, um, which which I think is interesting, right? Like that's a decision that an Amazon seller needs to make. Like, are you willing to have to fulfill that from your own warehouse space, or do you want Amazon to keep doing it for whatever 20%
right.
or however much that the FBA portion of that fee is?
And
Um,
I
that's,
think you don't truly understand what that cost is until you take it on yourself.
yeah, right, right, and 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 how. how valuable it can be to use Amazon in that respect, like what all of the headaches that they're taking on
Right.
because of this, right? Sure, you're probably paying a little bit more as a percentage than it would take to fulfill it yourself, but then you don't have to deal with it.
Right.
and
Exactly.
and that and especially for those sellers that are in that middle range. um, this information wasn't included in the report, but that would be an interesting crosstab that I'd like to see. Is like, who is it that was doing that fulfillment by merchant? Is that like all those bigger companies,
Right.
or is it like the ones on the ends, right? The big ones and the small ones, but
Yep.
not the ones in the middle. Because you could see how both of those situations, it would make sense, right? When you're big enough that you can afford to do it all on your own, like that's one thing. When you're so small that you don't really need, FBA anyway, because you could just make a weekly run to USPS or whatever. Like those are much,
Yeah.
those are those can be valuable in certain ways for sure.
So, as somebody that ran a business with
Yeah.
our own fulfillment center, and I wouldn't call it a fulfillment center, we had our own warehouse, and we had a warehouse man who, I told this story a number of times, would run laps through the warehouse capturing all the product.
Right.
Well, if you think about that, this was our one business. We had two forklifts. We had one person in the warehouse. We had multiple other people. Yeah, we had segregated it. One forklift was for the distribution center, the other was for manufacturing. Now, you go to Amazon and look at their warehouse, they have a dozen or dozens of electronic pallet jacks and forklifts, etc. So,
Yeah.
you're operating your own warehouse. You spring a leak in your forklift. Now, not only are you out your forklift, now you have hydraulic fluid all over your floor. You got to clean it up.
Uh-huh.
So you don't see the true cost until you run into situations like that. So there's
Yeah.
hard cost, and then because of that, now you have the delays, and now you're put on account health issues. So yeah, there are a lot of different factors there. So
Yeah.
that 40% might be pretty attractive at some point. It really depends.
Right.
You just
Absolutely.
have to weigh that out, and I mean, if you have a decent forklift and you take care of it, you maintain it, you make sure it's in top shape, you're not going to have those issues. But a hose can break at any moment, and
That's
it
right.
could take you down. So it just want to make sure you're looking at the big picture. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is an important decision to make.
Yeah.
One other bit of survey, and this I think, Jay, is probably the last thing we'll talk about from this, unless you've got some other stuff that you want to talk about, and is related to deals and deal fatigue. And so they asked the question, like, do you participate in Prime Days? Jay, did you know it's Prime Days right now?
Is it really? No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like big deal days or something is happening
Oh,
right now. I
cool.
keep getting ads for that. Yeah, right. Um, but Jay, what that makes clear to me is that deal fatigue is a real thing, and respondents
Yeah.
respondents definitely agree with them scoring something a little higher than 6 out of 10 on are you experiencing deal fatigue? Like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of different factors associated with that, right? Amazon wants people to buy stuff regularly, and so they want to have these experiences associated with that. But as consumers start to like recognize that this is happening, or in your case, Jay, maybe they don't recognize that it's happening. It just becomes a thing that now you're discounting your products, but you're not even driving volume. And so I was surprised, but not once I thought about it a little bit more, but surprised at first that only 38% of respondents participated in Prime Day or Big Deals Days or Black Friday specials. Um, but once I started to think about like the implications of that, right? Of wait, there's like basically every other month it seems like there's some kind of special
Right.
thing happening, right?
Right.
Well, maybe it doesn't make that much sense to participate in these if you're looking for depending on the type of product that you're selling and lots of different other factors. Jay, as you were reading this report, did that surprise you at all?
It really didn't surprise me.
Mm.
But what did surprise me is they have approximately 35% uh, take up on that.
Yeah.
And of that, the largest portion is the 5 million and up seller. And
Yeah.
they're at about 45%, while all the others are at 30. So
Right.
it's a lot easier for the larger sellers to offer the deals to be sustained on a prime day or a prime shopping day.
Right.
So, yeah, you talk about,
Checks out.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Definitely an interesting set of data. And so Jay, again, that was the last page of the report. So we've talked about a lot of different topics that came out of this. The look into, oh my gosh, what is the name of the report?
The voice of the
The voice
Amazon
of the
seller
seller,
report.
the voice of the Amazon seller report. And so Jay, if we were to summarize this into a few interesting things, like if you were to go back and create the tabs or whatever that go along with this with this episode today, what are the final takeaways that we want to leave people with as we head into the weekend?
Well, I think the number one thing is, sellers are on the platform, but they do have some skepticism regarding it.
Yep.
And they are fearful of competition, they're fearful of higher cost,
Yep.
and they are fearful of the low cost imports.
Yeah.
And I mean, no
Right.
shock there.
Yeah.
So I think that leaves us with things that we need to be watching over the next few months as,
Right.
you know, reciprocal tariffs kick in, if they kick
Yep.
in, and what the impact is.
Right. Well, and then there are a few things that you can still be doing right now, right? To be thoughtful and understand the situation that's going on here, right? The first one, we harp on it all the time, but it remains true, is focus on your margin control. Make sure you have a really good understanding of your landed costs. Use our landed cost calculator to help you. Make sure that you understand the fees that you're agreeing to when you use FBA, and then understand also what the cost might be to fulfill it yourself. Like, make sure that you understand the strategic aspects of making that decision. If you do sell exclusively on Amazon or significantly on Amazon, consider diversification, right? Consider maybe it is time to depending on your size, right? Maybe it is time to have a Shopify store or something. Like, consider whether that's even a thing that you can do. I think it is an extremely important thing to own your customer relationships, because it's the while the customer may find you at Amazon, they found you, and they're going to buy from you now, if they have a good experience, right? And so if you own that relationship and you build that brand equity, that can be a really important factor to help you combat some of these other things, as well as to support you if you did decide to diversify outside of Amazon. Um, and then finally, again, a thing that we would tell you all the time is regularly review your tech stack to make sure that you understand how it's supporting you and whether it's supporting you properly. So, so I think that those things are all things that we would have told you before we talked today.
No, for sure.
But they are things that are highlighted by the sets of problems that Amazon sellers are seeing, as well as the things they're worried about. And so I think that those are the takeaways that I'd leave with today. Um, Jay, do you have any other final thoughts? Anything as we head into the weekend?
Well, as we talk about diversification, the one thing that I can think about as an advisor is the sales tax compliance aspect. So,
Yeah.
selling on Amazon, Amazon is a marketplace facilitator, which means they collect and remit that sales tax. So, you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about that. The second you start selling on your Shopify site or another site you're running on your own,
Sure.
that's going to open you up to economic nexus. And there's a dollar threshold and or a unit or sales volume uh, threshold.
Right.
Those are combined with your Amazon numbers. So, if you are over the threshold basically on Amazon, and you have one sale in a state, now you have to collect sales tax in that state. So now there's more infrastructure you have to maintain, other compliance. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to that, because you do not want to be caught flat-footed and not being up to date on that, because once that gets out of hand, it is a bear to reel it back in and make sure that you got that under
Right.
control. So stay ahead of that, and reach out to Chris.
Yeah.
We can help you with that, making sure
Yep.
that you know what's going on and where you are within the Nexus and all those other fun things. So
I I do think that that's a great like final lesson, right? Uh, is the good news is like you don't have to go into this battle on your own, right? There are good advisors out there that can provide you advice and help you to interpret the data and information that's out there in a way that allows you to make the right decisions. That's exactly what Jay and I do, and that's exactly what we'd love to do for you. So thank you, of course, for tuning in today. Jay, do you have any weekend plans?
uh, yeah, tomorrow is going to be a fun, easy day.
Mm,
Uh, Sunday, my wife and I are driving up to see our daughter at school. Her sorority's having an anniversary, something or other. So my wife is going to attend.
of course,
I'm
sure.
gonna
Yeah.
catch up with them later. I'm gonna check out the St. Augustine and everything that it's got to offer.
Yeah.
And so just have a nice relaxing weekend. So how
That
about you?
sounds great. Well, like I mentioned, it's my wife's birthday today. Um, we are probably not doing anything all that special today, but tomorrow, the city of McKinney, which is right over there, right over there, they are their downtown area is every quarter does a coffee crawl, Jay. And so while I've been drinking non-alcoholic beer while we've been chatting today, tomorrow I'll be drinking caffeinated coffee from a lot of different little local shops. It's a fun little event to get people out to come walk around the shops of the downtown area in McKinney, and then have a few cups of coffee and some little breakfast treats.
Nice.
Everybody does like a spring themed little flavored thing, be that food or coffee or whatever. So Kayla, my wife, loves that, and so it worked out great that it's the day after her birthday. It's
Yeah,
perfect. It's
that's great.
a
Now,
perfect thing to do.
now you mentioned spring themed
Yeah,
treats.
yeah.
Are you in spring, or does it feel like summer's kicking in?
It is definitely spring.
Yeah.
The past couple days has been rainy. Right now it's 70 degrees here in the DFW area. It is not summer, but it's really springy. Everything is just turning green.
Yeah.
The allergy season across my family is ramping up, and I'll be so excited for whatever it is that the cottonwoods start to let their cotton off. Ugh, not looking forward to that, but
I hear you.
everything. This is an interesting time of year for me, especially as a relatively new homeowner, because we have like 10 different trees on our property, and they were all like planted at the time that the house was built, and so I'm always curious about how they're going to come back and whether they're going to spring out because they're still kind of getting established.
Yeah.
We had a tree replaced last year. We actually already know we're probably going to have to replace a couple this year. So I'm always like, come on, you guys can do it. Show me all those leaves. Until my wife starts to die from all the different pollen, and then I'm like, wait a minute, wait, baby, let's go
Yeah.
back, Um,
Yeah.
so so yeah, it's definitely spring here. We're getting the spring rains and everything right now. Like literally over the past 3 days, it's just been raining.
Yeah. We have
So
not had any considerable rain in the last month, 2 months at this point.
it's coming, Jay. You got 2 days. It'll be
Well,
there.
yeah, this weekend we're getting rain. We're getting rain, but after
That's
that,
right.
mid next week, they're saying we're going to be close to 90.
Yeah, buddy.
So
Whew.
summer's around the corner.
I guess
So,
so.
if you sell pool products, get them out, get them rolling, because they're going to start selling.
Oh, that's really funny because my daughter, I walk her to school every morning,
Yeah.
and yesterday morning, one of our neighbors who has a pool, the pool guy was out doing the like cleanup, I guess, getting the pool ready, and she's like, "What's that guy doing?" He's cleaning someone's pool.
Yeah, for sure.
so so super funny.
Yeah.
So again, our final message here today, like if you're using Amazon, understand the different aspects of what's going on there. Understand that you're not alone in feeling pressure in from all kinds of different ways, be that from Amazon from pricing, be that Amazon from suspension risk, or be that from international competitors or inter-Amazon competitors. Um, and know that there are teams like us at High Rock who are out there to help make sure that you have all the information that you need and that you can make the best decisions for you. And that's what we're here to highlight on the e-commerce hour. So come back and listen to us again next week as we talk about some other topic of relevance to you as an e-commerce seller.
As of right now, we're probably going to be talking tariffs.
Probably.
And we're anticipating. Well, we already know that the auto tariffs are going into effect on the 3rd. We have reciprocal tariffs going into effect. So we're going to talk tariffs, and if that fizzles out, we might pivot. But right now it's looking like we're going back there.
Yep.
So
New tariff talk.
Get those tariff questions out, and have them ready for us.
That's right. Yeah, and the same thing, right? If you have some experience, good or bad, with Amazon, we'd love to hear that too. So drop that in the comments. Subscribe to the show, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
See everybody.
Bye.